Hello, and welcome to this evening's edition of Civil Talks. Tonight, we discuss the most important crisis of the 19th century, the debate over slavery.
Tonight, we talk to men of both sides, of both views, an abolitionist from Pennsylvania and a planter from Georgia.
Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest, Mr. Cornelius Marshall. Mr. Marshall, welcome to the show.
Mr. Marshall, I understand that you own slaves. How does it feel to own other human beings?
Well, sirs, I assure you that my owning of slaves is strictly business. I assure you, I take no pleasure in the matter. Besides, we saved them from themselves. In Africa, they had to hunt for their own food and would walk around their villages half-dressed or wearing nothing at all. This is not the way a man should live. We provided them with a better life.
I understand. Mr. Marshall, how are slaves treated on your plantation?
Well, usually my overseers tend to the slaves, not me. I don't see what goes on, but I trust my overseers greatly to handle each situation appropriately. I did, after all, hire them myself, but I will intervene if a situation gets too out of hand.
Mr. Marshall, would you please define out of hand for our viewers?
If a slave is caught trying to escape, or is caught purposely destroying property, this situation is out of hand.
Thank you.
What sort of punishment is dealt to a slave for this sort of behavior?
We usually whip them or beat them. However, if a slave ever becomes too unruly and provocative, they might be sent to a slave breaker.
Mr. Marshall, would you please explain to the audience what a slave breaker is?
A slave breaker is similar to a horse breaker, in the sense that when a horse, or in this case, slave, is misbehaving and cannot or will not follow orders, they must be disciplined in the highest manner until they can learn obedience. The concept is the same with a slave breaker, but with slaves instead of horses.
Thank you.
Cornelius, are you aware of the North's movements to restrict slavery in the westward colonies and of abolitionists trying to obliterate it from our nation?
Yes, I'm aware of this, and I feel that to rid the South of slavery would be to rid South of its way of life, in the sense that people of the South have been owning slaves and relying on agriculture since colonial times. For the North, I can see how it was so easy for them to pack their bags and move to cities to work in factories. The North has really only ever produced goods. The soil in the North is not fertile, unlike southern soil, but for us, it would be ridiculous for us to simply give up on planting and to work on factories. Furthermore, the abolition of slavery in the South should be the choice of the people of the South, not some factory workers in the North. I truly believe that the people of the South will make the right decision in governing themselves and keeping our slaves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your insight. Now, I'd like to welcome our next guest. Mr. Smith, come on down.
Now, John, what do you think of the idea of a man owning another man?
I think it's wrong. What difference are we from them? Would you like it if it were the other way around? The Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal, that they were endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can these things be true when we allow slavery in the South? With men being beaten and whipped, does this sound like liberty to you? This is this pursuit of happiness that all men are entitled to?
Okay, then how do you feel about the Supreme Court declaring that slavery is not only protected by the Constitution, but it is not even within the government's power to take away property that is owned by the people?
Property? Property? Riddle me this. How can a man that was created equal by the same maker be property to another man?
So do you believe that slavery should not be allowed to move west?
Well, sir, if I have not yet made my viewpoint completely clear, no, slavery should not, absolutely by no means, be permitted to move west. I will not settle with the government's proposed compromises regarding slavery and its expansion or prevention and such.
So, Mr. Smith, how do you feel about Mr. John Brown and the government sentencing him to death?
I say God bless Mr. Brown. He's done his fellow countrymen and citizens well. He's the greatest example of patriotism I've ever seen. Sure, give the South their wish, but while his lifeless carcass blows in the wind under a willow, his message will become even stronger. He will become a martyr to his cause. He will be known round the world as the man who sparked the end of slavery.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for sharing your views on the topic. We'd like to thank all of our speakers here today for their opinions on the latest trending in the nation. Stay tuned next week for more important debates. I'm Rob Kaler. For my partner, Bo Perry, we say goodbye and Godspeed. Mr. Marshall, I understand that you own slaves. How do you feel about owning other humans?
Well, sirs, I assure you that my owning of slaves is strictly business. I assure you, I take no pleasure in this matter. Besides, we saved them from the...
It says fro. That fro is really...
I said fro themselves, not from.
Wait, we're still filming. What sort of punishment is dealt to the slaves for this sort of behavior?
We usually whip them, or beat them. However, if a slave ever becomes...
You're not supposed to.
I'm sorry.
We are totally
I know that. My name is Cornelius. Wait, no.